Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today we're bringing you a full, official, right for you, wrong for you on Vampire the Masquerade chapters. And just for the caveat, the thing that is important to say, the thing that all of you are curious about, we did get a copy of this game early for the sake of the review.
Yep.
We do not have any paid or sponsored incentive with Vampire the Masquerade. I previewed this back in the day. They were an indie publisher doing something really cool and really new. And I was really excited to check out, well, what this had become. And so I begged them to send me a copy to let me dive in. And so I have a pre-production copy here. They are currently working on delivery and fulfillment, and they are approaching another campaign. They're going to be launching Werewolf here soon, which is super exciting. That being said, outside of that context, this is an honest-to-goodness review. I've spent about 10, 12 hours diving into this. I've read through the rulebook about 3 full times.
Yeah.
You've spent probably 6 or 7?
Yep.
We've went on a campaign journey.
Reading parts of the rulebook alongside of that. We've gone on this campaign journey, for about like 6 episodes at this point.
We'll get into it. Here's the thing. For those of you that are watching this, there's 2 reasons why we're doing the Right For You, Wrong For You series. First off, this is the standard series here at Quackalope. This is the series that we do to analyze whether or not a game is going to not only be a match for us, but also a match for you. We analyze 7 different categories to determine whether or not a game should be added to our collection or onto our shelf. We look at the overview of the game. We talk about the theme. We analyze the accessibility. We have a discussion about the gameplay. We break down the different modes of play. We take a close look at whether or not the game is innovative or not. And then finally, we discuss the price. Now, we've also added an 8th category here, which is going to be our final personal opinion based off of our current standing with the game. If you want to skip to that, I'm sure Shira will have done timestamps to this down below. You can jump there. The reason why we're doing a Right For You, Wrong For You, though, is for 2 things. One, this raised $1.3 million on Kickstarter.
Had 6,000 backers.
And because this is currently, they've hit print on this.
Yep.
It is currently in the production and delivery phase of the game, and they're going to be launching the next thing, the next iteration, the next experience. We wanted to bring you as much coverage as possible so that you could not only take a look at how the game plays, what the unique items of the game are, and then also hear our personal opinions about what Vampire the Masquerade has done well and has not done well, so that you can decide whether or not you want to back Werewolf as it approaches, because this will not have arrived to backers by the time Werewolf launches. It's just a logistic thing. If you followed anything about the shipping crisis and the chaos that's happened in the world, it totally makes sense.
They've been communicating really well on their campaign.
They've been doing amazing.
And they've been in touch about everything that they've been going through. So you can also go check out some of their updates on their pledge.
That being said, we have 4 brand new gameplay videos coming out, along with the original gameplay I did with Jan about a year ago. We also are going to have a first look video that is already posted. The first look is a series that we do here on Quackalope where we take a close, detailed look at something that is unique or interesting about a game. In this case, it's going to be the storybook elements. These tiny little
chapter books
that, for me, are mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Okay. That being said, Shira.
Yes.
Right for you, wrong for you. Let's get started here, and I'm going to back off just a little bit. Let's start with an overview. What is Vampire the Masquerade chapters?
This is a narrative-driven, open-world exploration campaign game with boss battling elements.
That's a great description.
Yep.
It's a great description.
I thought I worked on it.
It really works.
It touches all of these elements, and we'll go into more detail about them. But yes, it is it's not so much sandboxy, but it is open world. You're exploring, you're boss battling. It's a campaign game. You're increasing your stats, you're building your characters up, and taking down and engaging in these social situations. Yeah. This is a very social-driven game where you are interacting a lot more with items, with clues, with people, and having dialogue than you are necessarily fighting battles. Battles, I would actually segregate down to like 20-30% of your interactions, and the other 70-80% are most of your player interactions with NPCs on the board, with tokens, and trying to put your mindset into this world and navigate the hierarchy and the social structures that allow you as a vampire to remain alive.
It's based off of the classic Vampire the Masquerade RPG game, which was like a 1990s, early 2000s RPG game. I know it still exists, don't get on me about that. But like West grew up playing this thing, was obsessed with it when he was little, right? And so it takes that world and it explores how to bring that world into a setting that doesn't require a DM or a dungeon master to run. You are 100% going to be diving into the characters that you play, and while you do have the option to create your own variable character, vampire,
make
pup,
a new one.
Yeah, a vampire pup that has never really existed, a neonate that has never really existed. You can also take the role of very specific characters with their own traits and their own RPG classes and skill sets and starting abilities, and watch as they journey through this adventure. This is, at its heart, a choose-your-own-adventure social game, right? And that's the fascinating thing about this. With Werewolf coming up, I think it's due diligence to mention Werewolf is going to be much more of a violent, combat-oriented game. Vampire is not that. And the reason it's not that is because vampire society doesn't actually want that. They want politics and position, and the hierarchy of clans matters. And this game does that. And this game focuses on how your dialogue changes, or the tone of
your
voice
subtle
that
nuances,
you use.
Your subtle nuances in whether or not you're
respected
a bully
the prince,
or whether you're like just too forward with your words. Like the choices are sometimes very minute. You might be getting to the same end, but the path that you took to get there is going to determine your outcome.
Yeah. So, an overview of this. Can you please just read through that description that you said one more time?
Narrative-driven, open-world exploration campaign with boss battling elements.
If you're looking for a narrative-driven, open-world exploration campaign game with boss battling elements,
this game might be right for you.
I mean, do I need to say more? I probably don't. Okay, number 2. Let's talk about theme.
I mean, this book gives you 8 pages of introductory lore before you even start getting into your own scenario and chapter. I kept turning the page and turning the page and turning the page, and there is story after story. Each character has their own kind of prologue to kind of get them up and running and introduce you to them and their flavor. This is set in the world of Montreal. This is set in a Canadian world.
Did you even realize that this existed?
No, I haven't even looked. So
something like 500,000 words.
Yeah. So this is set in, I believe, Montreal, where it is post a Sabbat ruled world. Sabbat were kind of these very forward-facing and aggressive vampires that were too forward-facing in the human world. And the humans had to take a stand and take them down on the Night of the Ashes. And this is in that world that has become of that, where there's now this thing called the Masquerade, where vampires have to remain hidden and disguised and can't overtly display their true nature for fear that they're going to get taken out and get killed. Because, yes, while they're pretty indestructible, there's ways to permanently remove vampires.
Mostly fire.
Sticks don't do much, they just hold them in place until till other damaging things come to them. But yeah, so this is set in that theme of the world, and there's a very strong social hierarchy where there's a French prince who's at the top. He has his sheriff, he's got deputies, he's got bodyguards underneath him, and then there's clans upon clans upon clans, and some of them like to mingle with each other, and some of them don't like to mingle with each other, some of them are more antagonistical, and each clan kind of has their own representatives and diplomats, and you are playing little newbies, little neonates inside these clans that will clans specifically have interactions in the game. If you're playing as certain characters or if you're playing as a certain clan, you're going to be able to do more things or do less things in different scenarios.
That's one of the most fascinating parts about this, is not only is it a narrative story, but it's a narrative story where it doesn't apologize for having you as players take the role of a character. Whether that is Jade that I'm playing here that is really good at blood magic and is part of the Temeraire.
I'm playing as Thomas Artrand, who is just a brute,
classic
Bruja
clan.
And yeah, he's strong. He's great. And I've been upgrading his strength and physical stats throughout this game. And yeah, these are like who you can start playing as. And there's so many characters. There's expansions that bring even more characters to the table.
And there's the chance of having your character swap mid-campaign depending on what has happened in the world and the environment. And so this game doesn't apologize. Vampire does not apologize for having you play a role and play a character within the social hierarchy that you exist in. And so your characters have all been brought together specifically because the Sabbat is starting to rise up again, and there's threats happening, and the prince is concerned about that. And so all the clans have agreed to work together, not only to instill and keep the Masquerade afloat, which is the hidden idea that humans don't know about vampire kind, and the responsibility that you have to not let humans know about vampire kind, but also you're working together to try to figure out whatever this mystery is and why the Sabbat are making more of a presence, why they're starting to stir up things, why they're creating weapons and crafting military devices.
Yeah.
And you're dived into the front of that, and you have the opportunity to really mess up.
Yes.
To really have things go severely wrong because you're a pup, you're brand new.
And you don't always know what you're doing here.
But it also enhances and encourages replayability. You will know the core story as you progress through, but we've already seen within the time we've played core decisions divide different ways.
Yeah, different timelines that we have not been able to go down.
Sections of
chapters that have not been able to open. Yeah,
chapters that we have opened, but we only saw half of the content that existed.
Yeah, we will like hold a book and we'll go blow through the chapter and we're like, we didn't even touch 50% of the dialogue on these pages.
And so the opportunity, if you love this experience and you love this game, to have it be replayable, from my own standard, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, as a solo player going character by character through the journey and the story, because it changes your strategy so much, or as two players or a group of players, if you're playing more of a regular kind of classic RPG setting, there's enough story here to continue diving through at least 2, if not 3 times without feeling like you've repeated content.
Yeah.
So there's the theme. There's the idea behind the game. If you're looking for a game that looks at Vampire the Masquerade RPG or, Twilight or any of the fan fiction that has come afterwards in the vampire werewolf world and lore, and you want something dark and gritty that really sinks its teeth into the game system,
this game might be right for you.
It might be right for you.
And this is also unapologetically mature.
It is. It certainly is.
My mind keeps darting to Dark Order in a sense of like that detective aspect, the unapologetically mature
cussing,
description,
drugs.
Yeah.
I haven't seen any sexual violence here.
Then some of the little side texts that we didn't get to go to, there was some undressing.
Okay.
So there is some, but yeah, it's reminding me of that. And I like the fact that it's unapologetic. There is cussing, there is that violence, there is very gruesome descriptions. So it's not necessarily family friendly.
It's not as raunchy as 50 Shades of Grey, but it's close.
Accessibility.
Let's go ahead and talk about the accessibility of this game. This is where some strong caveats I think are going to start showing up here.
I said it was kind of a moderate accessibility. This is going within the genre of campaign games and boss battling games. Boss battling games for me always have technical nuances on how players play their cards, and initiative and defense and offense and line of sight and movement rules, and every campaign game that I've interacted with has some slight twist, which makes you have to reread that rulebook numerous amounts of times to get it right and to hopefully be playing it correctly. But if you're not too big of a stickler, you can have a really good time.
Yeah, I have to agree with you that this is going to be moderate difficulty, and it's for 2 reasons. Accessibility is not just how easy it is to get to the table, but it's also like, how easy is it to get to the table? And it's going to be both of those things. I said at the beginning of this, as a credit to my name, that I'd read the rulebook 3 times. Now, I am not the best rulebook reader. I'm not the most comprehensive. I'm not making that claim. No. However, there are absolutely been things and elements and moments that come from a more open world, freeform style game that just aren't specified here.
Yeah.
We've had to make judgment calls or determinations based on how we think the game should respond or should react. And
that's the caveat that this is not the final rule book, but it's pretty close there.
I do think by the time people get this into their hands, there are going to be some elements of this game that require either your moral choice or a little bit of community engagement and conversation. And the publisher has been really good at that. So those questions will be answered. As
they get encountered. I kind of like the rule books that the publishers always just write a little note at the end, like, if you ever find a discrepancy or have a question, rule with how it would
sure.
play to be fun.
Yeah.
Rule within that it will feel thematic and fun for you. Or sometimes it says rule against you so that it feels miserable.
Yeah.
Kingdom Death unapologetically says rule against players' favor always.
And there hasn't been a lot of those moments, but there definitely has been some. The rulebook, I think, actually does a very good job at what it's trying to do.
Yep.
It is a confusing game. One scenario could have the opportunity to engage in direct, brutal combat or be solved completely through dialogue. And for a rulebook to explain and diagnose and be like, hey, you start your turn by acting. And these are the 72 things you can do. And here's what might happen. And if you find yourself in that position, great. Well, what if I found myself in another position or even another position on top of that? And they've created a game that lets me have that freedom, but it comes at a cost of being accessible. And if you're a rules stickler, this might frustrate you.
I think one or two things that I would want from that rulebook, in addition to where it's already at, I think I want more examples, like specific card and pictures. I'm a very visual learner.
That's where we come in. The gameplay videos we've made, perfect examples.
I would want pictures of certain text on cards and say, if you see this text on a card, that's what this means, and that's how it's kind of delineated, and just a little bit more examples in the book. I think the rulebook is very clear. It's easy enough to read. I enjoyed reading it. It wasn't a slog to get through. It wasn't like darting you all over the place, but I want more, a little bit more.
Now, the context that Shira doesn't have that actually helped me quite a bit is this game also introduces, and this is going to be part of the accessibility, there are, I want to say 8 prologue episodes. Yeah. Every standard character has a single player version of a prologue episode. It establishes who the character is, how they play, and also core mechanics of the game, and it digs into elements that it answers.
Yeah.
If you're engaging in a fight, well, the prologue episode on fighting, which is your character, walks you through that. If you're engaging in investigation and conversation, my character Jade here teaches you how to do that.
Yeah. I jumped in at chapter 1, so I didn't play through those prologue episodes.
Yeah, and so while the rulebook does say that each prologue should take about 10 minutes, I did find with setup and breakdown and just learning the game while you play, the prologues were actually closer to about 30 to 45 minutes in total. And so, are you willing to spend a total of 6 hours as a solo player to learn the game in order to teach your game group? The answer in my case was yes, and I enjoyed going through them.
Especially if you like the lore. I think it's just additional content.
But they are an additional bit of work. And so accessibility is going to be caveated in 2 ways. One, we have the caveat that the rulebook, while good, does not answer every single thing because the game makes it nearly impossible. Mm-hmm. And the second caveat for me is going to be the fact that teardown, breakdown, setup, the whole learning the game process, it probably is a solid about 5 hours to get into, and you shouldn't really start judging the game until you've spent that time and then proceeded to play it. And that's a hard spot to be. That's a big ask for the game to make.
Yeah, how do you talk about teardown and setup? I know
I actually find so if you watch my unboxing video, this game arrived disorganized. Yeah. It had gone to conventions, tokens were all over the place. I spent a good 60 minutes or so reorganizing every card, every miniature, every standee. And now, teardown and setup is actually really nice. So some tricks that I've done is I've put all the standees in bags, and that's assuming you don't have the miniature pack, in bags related from 1 to 25. That's allowed me to pull them out a lot quicker and a lot more accessible. I standardized everything into small little storage bags. I organized all the cards and then stacked them vertically into the trays so they're easy to grab out, but also easy to sort. And then you and I have been really persistent about replacing cards and replacing elements in the correct order.
That's typical for a campaign game.
So between game to game, I think it was about 15 minutes at the most to reset, rebuild the board, repull the standees, as long as you've done the work necessary to get that system up and running. And because the game does things like gives you one big tile for every chapter and scenario you're facing off with, it gives you unique artwork, and it makes this setup a lot more simple. So as far as accessibility goes, if you're looking for something that is open world to a T, meaning you have the negative consequences and the positive benefits of having a game that allows you to explore, but maybe doesn't always teach you everything you need to know, and a game that requires you to put some effort in to learn, it might still be a game that's right for you. Moving on to point number 4, I think, is going to actually be the gameplay. And this is not how to play the game.
Yep.
This is what elements of the game for you make it either right or wrong for you.
Yeah, in that category, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about components. I was trying to figure out where to put components in elsewhere, but that specific fact that you don't have to deal with 5 different pieces of terrain and the tiles, the fact that it is one big tile makes it so nice. I mean, I've dealt with many campaign games where you are putting various pieces of tiles, and each tile and terrain type has different sets of rules. I like that this is one board with artwork, and then you just put pieces on it, interaction pieces and standees and miniatures, and I really like that.
This is 40 different pieces of artwork. Yeah. 40 different boards you're playing with.
So I just wanted to toss that out because you had just touched on that at the very end of accessibility.
That's in the core box.
Gameplay and things that make this right for me. I mean, is this where we get to talk about the little chapter books?
If you'd like to, sure.
These little chapter books are delightful. I actually think they facilitate a more of a solo gameplay than necessarily a group gameplay, because I kind of, as someone who needs to read the text as a very visual learner, I like holding the book.
Like my voices.
No, you struggle with reading sometimes. I like to hold the book, and it is very holdable. I also think it doesn't obstruct the table in very ways. Like sometimes when you have a massive storybook, it sits in the middle, it gets in the way. This is very easy to hold. Additionally,
we ended up using this as a mat and to roll on top of.
It was our dice
really
rolling.
Good. It was great.
Great dice tray. No, I actually like these because I'm one who likes to dart my eyes ahead, and sometimes I get spoilers when it's massive pages of text. When it's these little pages of text, I can't always dart my eyes down and see what the spoilers are. And then especially because you're turning pages, and it usually doesn't go like from the left page to the right page. You're usually having to turn a page. You can't always see what the consequences for your actions are going to be. And while I am the unknown, the control part of me wants to know what I'm getting myself into, the part that actually likes to be kept in suspense and is frustrated that I sometimes get spoilers likes that. I really like the size of them. They are perfect to hold. The text might be a little small for some people, but they highlight and bold and color code certain items.
And have you seen how many there are?
And there's an insane amount of them. Yes.
It's ridiculous. Doubling down on that one particular element, Shira, I like that this game cares about choice. And it cares about choice in a very real way. We've already talked about some scenarios where it does feel like you end up at the same location that you would have ended up if you went down various pathways. But one of the points that I made when I was talking to you is I've seen some of these networks, and some of them go 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
And you could go 1 to 3. You could jump. You could move past 2 without a problem. But you also might go 1, 6, and then either 3 or 5. Meaning you could still end up at the same position, but there's branching narrative pathways in each one of these little storybooks that could end up spiraling you in a dozen different directions. And then they also do things like they give you gear cards or effect cards.
Yes.
And this entire stack of effect cards over here will have lasting consequences from round to round. Boons and benefits, consequences and rewards for the choices that you've made.
Based on how you've interacted in the game. I think also the choices are consequential.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've talked about in other campaign games. Where sometimes if you feel like your choice is not consequential, then you don't necessarily want to be engaging in more choices. You don't feel like you've made a difference and your actions are meaningful.
Yeah.
And in here, every action you take feels meaningful, feels like it made a difference, and feels like it led you to a slightly different curvy pathway that, like you said, might have gotten to the same place, but also might lead you to somewhere entirely new.
I really think Vampire the Masquerade cares. It cares about the writing, it cares about the narrative, and it cares about the choices you make. And for a game that gives me the visage of choice, it has to care. And if it doesn't, and if I discover that it doesn't at any point, which we haven't so far here, it'll burst that bubble for me, right? Yeah. So the other thing, let's move on to some things that might be negatives when it comes to the gameplay.
I want you to do one more positive.
One more positive?
Yeah, your stat sheet.
One more positive.
I really like how you are engaging with your stat sheet. You have your base attributes, which kind of have 4 different skills underneath each of them. And your base attributes determine how many dice you roll for that set of skills, and then your skills and all of your check marks under them indicate how many inherent successes you get within that skills. Your discipline allows you to have more cards, your experience points allows you to level this up, and at the end of every chapter you're getting various amounts of experience points that you need to keep track of, because like Jesse said before, you might have to switch out a player later on. But I like this choice. I like I like defining my character and choosing what path, choosing what I want to upgrade in a very clear and concise manner. I like that these are the amount of dice, these are the successes, and it gets pretty pricey. When you're going from 3 to 4 or 4 to 5, you need like 20 experience points on some of these places, and you're only getting 3 or 5 at the end of each chapter. You're having to choose what you're working towards and how you're specializing. And I like powers and abilities and specializing and becoming unique characters. And so this has been one of my favorite parts in this game, one of the mechanics.
So, moving on to things that might be a bit of a negative. You already mentioned the fact that there's some elements of the storybook that feel like it's a solo player game. And that's probably one of the criticisms that I have that might just make this not the right game for you and your game group. If you're playing a full 3 or 4 player campaign, which the game is built to do, there are going to be moments where a campaign chapter just does not fit your character type.
Yes.
There are some scenarios where Jade, who is the social and mental, the person that's able to deduce and study a scene like a crime scene investigator,
doesn't have to do much in an episode, in a chapter.
Because it's a fighting episode or a battle episode, and Thomas is just more powerful. But then on the contrary, Thomas is really ineffective when he's studying a dirty room for hidden information. And so while the narrative is interesting and it's fun to see as you stumble in or bumble into certain environments, we've had moments where like we looked at a scene and we were like, why did we ever send Jade in at all? Yeah. Like, you obviously should have dealt with that situation. Yeah. Or I obviously should have been doing the research and the deduction. And so I think there are moments where in a 3 or 4 player game, one player will do nothing. And if they enjoy the story, that's fine. But if they don't, if they want to feel like they're impacting the story, this kind of sucks.
I think they're also going to be listening to a lot of text and flavor. And I almost wish there was an app that read this to you in voices. Yeah. I with the amount of text like this, I kind of like...
I think this game is answering... So when app games come out...
Yeah.
I'm going to mention one that I like. I'm heartbroken that it's not going to exist at the moment. Kingdom Come Deliverance. Kingdom Come Deliverance was the first game to present an opportunity for a full VO experience on the table. I loved it. And they had to pull their funding because they didn't have what they needed to create a project like that. I think games like Vampire the Masquerade are saying, here's what would be in an app.
Yeah.
Here's everything that would be an app. Here's the AI and the deduction. And this is what it takes to have that be physical. And they're one of the only campaigns that I've seen do that right.
Yeah.
Do that well.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I think that among 3 or 4 players, it was going to... Not everyone could read at the same time. There's not multiple copies of all the text. You can't all follow along. You're going to be listening to someone reading, and you might get a chance to read, you might not. And so I think going along with what you're saying, I think, I mean, and this kind of goes to modes of play. Can we touch upon that? It's...
Well, I mean, first we have to wrap up gameplay.
Okay.
So, if you're looking for a game that does something insanely cool when it comes to the storybook and the way that it is having you make consequential decisions from chapter to chapter, and you don't mind playing this as a single or 2-player game experience, this might be right for you. That being said, if you're looking for something where every player feels like they're always intrinsically involved in decisions that are happening and where you're not just here for the story, but you're here for the mechanical choices that you're making, there may be a player or 2 in your game group of 3 or 4 who definitely don't feel like their opinion or their gameplay matters. And that might honestly be the crux as to why this isn't
right for you.
Yeah. Moving on from gameplay to
modes of play.
Modes of play.
This is a cooperative game. You're either playing solo or you're playing in a group with cooperative. And I think that my preferred way to play this is actually 2-handed as a solo player.
Without me.
Yeah.
She's removing me from the conversation.
Yeah. You were no help. No help.
Your preferred way to play doesn't involve me,
yes,
Shira?
Yes, you were no help in the battles. Your character
Shira's first
Jade
official
is awful.
solo campaign. Is that what we're talking about?
So I really like having 2 characters in a setting. I found a lot of the times your competition, who you were facing up against, was based either on a 1 or 2 player account or 3 to 4 player account.
It is.
So I either want to play 4 players, each of us being 2-handed, or I want to play 2 players with me just being one-handed.
Just so you know, the game actually provides an answer to the riddle that you're trying to solve. You could play 1 player, one-handed, and still pull in any of the other full characters as allies.
As like an ally and companion.
And so you can kind of do a simplified version of any of the other standard characters with their own base abilities.
Yeah.
And so you could play two-handed. You also could play one-handed with an extra character. And I actually, the hours that I've played without you has been solo. And I also have to admit that I've really enjoyed pulling this game out and just reading the text myself and processing the story.
Not having to read it out loud, not having to concentrate. For me, I'm more of a mechanics person and not as much of a flavor person. And so not having to make voices and not having to focus on what I'm saying, but just reading it in the intonation that I read internally.
And I really
That's
enjoy
the most pleasurable thing for
playing
me.
this game with you. I've had a great time reacting to events.
Yeah, I agree. But I also just kind of want to read it to myself and be like, okay, this is what your choices are, X or Y.
So Shira would remove me from the play experience. Yes. In my opinion, solo was really good. An incredibly solid way to play, but two-player as well was highly compelling. Because I got to sit here and we got to see things unfold, and I actually was so involved in the story and so engaged in the story that just watching you do stuff never really bugged me. Yeah. I was never disengaged with what was happening.
But that speaks to who you
to watch
are.
It happen. It does speak to who I am.
You like stories unfolding.
And I do think there's an opportunity in a 3 or 4 player game for people to have very, very critical moments. But if they're playing through a full campaign,
I mean, that timer. That is a critical moment for all players involved.
It's true.
There are some decisions where they give you a sand timer that you have to flip over, and you get negative consequences if you don't all agree on that decision within the time of that timer.
And if you're playing through a full campaign with 3 or 4 players and people are invested in the story and they're willing to sit back just like you would do in an RPG game when one character is having their moment to shine, this is going to do that in an RPG sense. It's going to give each character a big opportunity to shine every few chapters, and if that's cool to you, the game's going to do it really well. Now, other elements and modes of play. You're going to be playing through with your core character that you pick, and the decisions you make around your character are final and sticking. Except when a moment arises that you get an opportunity to switch characters. And when that happens, all of your XP transfers, and you get to build out a brand new archetype or player. And I think that's a really cool element in this game as well. The fact that they have the opportunity to transfer from one person that was part of the coalition to another character or another flavor that's coming in.
Yeah, we haven't gotten a chance to see that yet, but I'm really, I've been keeping track of my XP in that anticipatory moment.
Yeah. Okay, modes of play. If you're looking for something that we think shines at 1,
sometimes 2
or 2 players. If you want something that could be still very, very solid at 3 or 4 from an RPG experiential sense,
this game might be right for you.
It might be right for you. Let's move down from modes of play to innovation. So this is the question I always ask. Has Vampire the Masquerade chapters been innovative? If so, how? And if not, does it matter?
I think it has. I think these tiny little chapter books have been innovative. Yes, it is compiling text for a certain scenario in just a smaller format, but I think the ease of flipping, I think the size of it is new. I have not seen, and I like how it plays into the name of the game. It's chapters.
Yeah.
Each book is a chapter in your massive story, and I really like that. I don't know if, have you seen that mechanic?
I haven't. The closest thing I would describe it to is the text that has to be written for the sake of an app-based game.
Yeah.
Like, that is the degree to which social and dialogue matters in chapters, and I would agree with you. It was the thing that made this come to my radar originally on the prototype. It's a thing that's continuing to stand out here as I see the plethora of written dialogue and cool choices they have.
I love getting a new book and seeing how big it is and then seeing, oh darn, we just played only 20 minutes and we're done and we've completed the episode and we've missed so much. These are crucial.
They're really cool, and for those of you that are curious about, you're watching this to decide if you want to back a brand new Vampires or you want to back Werewolf down the road, coming up very soon, this alone is innovative and unique enough when it comes to a company executing on something that feels new about a board game for me to be encouraged and invest in them again. This is the first thing they've brought. Like, this is their first, like,
it's their first iteration.
Big box thing, right?
Yeah.
And so when you look at Flyhouse Games, when you look at the craziness that they produce when it comes to this big box experience, I cannot wait to see what else they come out with.
Along the conversation about innovation, I also really like the stat sheet. I don't know if it's necessarily...
It's not innovative.
It's not innovative specific, but I do like the organization of it. Yeah. I think it is clear. I think it is concise. And everything else is pretty typical for your open world exploration boss battle.
The only thing that
item cards, you have stats.
It's not a boss battler. Well, I mean, it's got boss battling elements.
Yeah.
But the only other thing that I think might be slightly innovative, or at least different, at least unique, I have never played a campaign game. And I've not played them all, but I've played quite a number of them. I've never played a campaign game that puts such a high emphasis on completing chapters and objectives with the potential for violence, but not necessitating violence.
Yes.
Gloomhaven is always fight to the death.
Yeah.
Like
Zombicide, sometimes you have
Zombicide,
objectives to complete,
it's
but
always
you're usually fighting.
fight to
You
the
have
death.
to get there.
Kingdom Death, take down the boss, build up your settlement. We're talking Madara. It's always skirmish through the dungeon crawl.
Yeah.
Massive Darkness. We're looking at Slay the Spire. We're Scythe. Like all of these that have campaign elements to
Tainted
them are
Grail,
always.
Etherfields.
They're not like Etherfields is experiential, but it's not social. It's not conversation. Vampire the Masquerade is the only one that I know of, or at least the highest one that I know of, that focuses on moments where you could play through 3 or 4 chapters that are just dialogue.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Yep.
It's really cool. Okay, so if you're looking for something that's innovative, that absolutely feels like it's created something new in our hobby space that I think other companies will copy or learn from, and you want something that feels unique when it comes to the gameplay experience you're getting, Vampire the Masquerade chapters Until Werewolf comes out
This might be right for
checks
you.
all those boxes. Let's move on to
price.
And this is hard because this was a Kickstarter product,
Yes.
which means the price we're going to be giving you is probably undervalued to what it would be or will be at market.
Yes. Bearing in mind that they might have it available, I don't know what they are having with their.
I really hope they do.
Their
I
werewolf
really hope
campaign.
they do.
They might have vampires available, but that is not a guarantee, and we don't know any of that information. So prices for base game with nothing else was $110, and that was including these standees. With 3
Base game includes character miniatures.
but
includes
not
like 7 or 8 characters to play. This entire storybook, that entire stack of books that I showed
Yes.
you, that's base game.
those tiles.
That's base game.
3 additional expansions came with the base game and included, came to a total of $150.
Okay.
And then an all-in deluxeified game with metal components, with miniatures for every single thing.
NPC, everything.
Yeah, that came,
Painted miniatures too, I believe.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Came to a total of $260, which I think is remarkable.
All of those prices before shipping.
Yep.
Shipping being what
On
it
top
is,
of it
is
all.
probably added anywhere from $30 to $50.
Yep.
So you're looking at $300 all in. You're looking at, $100 plus very comfortably for even the base game there.
I mean, I think the fact that if the miniatures were painted, that is a steal. You don't get painted miniatures for that price.
Yeah. What do you think about the price? Would you if you could keep this right now?
Yep.
What we have right now for $180? Are you keeping it? Are we complaining? We've got to mail this on.
What, for 3 expansions? $150 plus
we've got the
shipping?
2 expansions with us. We've got the base game here. Are you holding on to it?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, not letting it go.
What about the deluxe all in? Like if you had a chance to back it now, are you going $300 for the metal and the painted? Really?
Yes. I like the deluxeified games. Games that are in my core collection, which is leading to our personal opinions. I would put this into my core collection. I had a fantastic time. This is on my top 10 campaign games. I am not necessarily such a campaign person. I'm not always invested in the story.
She's not a campaign person because she hasn't been able to finish them with me.
Yes. I like to finish
She
that.
has loved playing them with me though.
Yes.
Kingdom Death is your number 2 now.
It is
which
number
is
2.
amazing.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so when it comes to my judgment call on the price, I wish the base box was a little bit less expensive. Only because I want more people to have access to this, and when you get into the $120 range, you're already squeezing some cheeks together. That being said, I think it's fair for the amount
of work that
you're getting and the amount of stuff you're getting. I just selfishly wish it was like a $90 base box because people should play this.
Yeah.
When we get up to the Deluxeified, I think if I was going to back this now, I don't know that I would be Deluxeified with you.
No.
I might pick and choose Deluxeification, but I personally don't need miniatures for all the NPCs.
Oh, I 100%.
You like minis.
I either want acrylics or minis. I am not a standee person. That is one thing that I don't like about Jaws of the Lion and Gloomhaven.
Yeah.
I like acrylics and miniatures.
I want the metal components.
Yep.
I want the metal dice. I want the Deluxeified little
Metals
bits and
are
pieces.
actually not what I want.
I love the metals. I don't think I need painted minis, and I don't think I need minis for every single sub-character. Because from my perspective, if I could get this right at the $200 price range, picking and choosing the deluxe add-ons that I want, that's 100% in there.
Yeah.
I am playing through every chapter in this game. I'm potentially going through a second campaign. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, $3 per play experience at a minimum?
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
It's more expensive to go to the movies.
If you could have rewound the last 12 hours I've spent, or the last 7 hours I've spent playing this with you, and you were like, hey, this is gonna cost you $70 or $120 for that experience.
Oh, I'd pay it.
I would have handed it over.
Yeah.
I just had a really good time.
Good day.
I had a good day.
Yeah.
Other than the dog situation, it was a good day. Other than that, we took the dog to the vet. Okay. Price point aside. Now,
personal opinion?
Yeah, so let's take a step back here. Personal opinion. I'll let you go first.
Personal opinion, I'm going to give this a solid rating. I've played this, I would say a fair amount, and my rating can change, and I want to see...
You were very skeptical.
I was very skeptical.
Let's get this whole context right. Shira almost didn't play this with me.
Yeah. That being said, this is ranking at a 4.5 for me. And the one thing that I'm waiting to see with the absolute final version is that rulebook. I want to see it a little bit more improved to facilitate a better playing experience. I really like what it's doing on the board, and as one who usually likes the combat, I like the social dialogue. I like the fact that I would dive into this solo, actually.
It's interesting.
I like it's enough to bring me in. I feel like I'm in the world. I like it a lot. And so, yeah, this is ranking at 4.5 out of 5. That's a 5-point rating scale for us.
Yeah, so my final thoughts, my final deduction on this game. I was super excited about this game originally when we first got the prototype in, and I've been talking about the way that it treats narrative and dialogue from that beginning. I've been hyping this. I've been excited about this from that point. And I'm really glad that I think it's executed on what I was promising people it would do. It is a game that is not combat focused. It is social focused. It is psychological. And yeah, you can bully your way through it, but you certainly don't need to. This is going to be 4 out of 5 for me. It's not that perfect 5 out of 5 yet.
What's it lacking?
And the stuff that it's lacking for me is twofold. First, I'm going to echo what you said. There's some areas of the rulebook and the AI cards and the help cards that I do just want a little bit more clarification on. There's some areas where I feel like a really detailed appendix would help.
Yes.
Or just go through and get every single keyword that you've ever used in the game, cards and all of it, and just give me 3 pages where you just break down all of those.
They do a pretty good job of that at the end, but yes, they
help, but what they don't do is they don't give reference cues.
Yeah.
So all of those words are there, the terms are there, in almost a thematic way.
Yeah, but not where you can go back into the book and read it.
But they don't echo each other. And so I'd have one professional give one final sweep to some of the nuanced detail of this. And then beyond that, the last thing that holds this back from being a perfect 5 out of 5 is just going to be the fact that there's some moments where I'm not engaged. There's some moments where I'm not the central player.
But as a solo gamer...
Yes. So as a solo gamer, for sure, but then you see less of the game because you have less characters that are journeying through it. And so I still have that stuck middle ground, right? I love playing this as a solo gamer, but I think my preference is actually to play through this with you, despite that not being your preference. And so with that being the context that I have, I do and know that I'm going to have those moments where I spend 30 minutes sitting back and watching you do stuff that's really cool. And you doing stuff that's really cool is great. Yeah. But it's not me doing stuff that's really cool.
I would agree with you.
And so it keeps it just below that line. That might change, honestly.
I think though the way that I would want to play it, that's where my ranking holds.
If you watched our full 4-episode campaign of this, that has the potential as we go through 7 total interludes or something like that. Something like that. No, maybe 3 interludes. There's 7 bosses and 3 full interludes.
Yes.
That has the potential to grow.
Yeah.
That's a solid rating built with the idea that this game is still from chapter to chapter developing in my mind.
Hopefully that provides you a lot of information going forward when you're encountering the next campaign.
This
werewolves,
4 gameplays, 10 minutes or less, the first look at these books and how they're unique.
So thank you so much for being here.
We're doing what we can, folks.
Whatever the case, whatever you do, remember to do the important thing.
Get out and play some games.
We'll see you next time.
By yourself, apparently.
Thanks.
You really don't want to play with me?